Hello all. Long time no see. I know. I just got a new computer for grad school. I know. I'm very excited. Even though it doesn't sound like it in my voice or on my face, but I am. More on that later. And I had to get a computer. I wasn't too thrilled about that just because I've had so many computers break, despite taking care of them like they were my children. And and they're like, oh, you need to have a laptop. And I was just going to use the library, but I'm a science major, so if my computer does science stuff that I can't do without. So, well, it's been a while, I know, but this is just an update on covering and such. I don't know about you guys, but my reasons for covering, they haven't changed. But the true reason, not that the other reasons were lies, but the true reason for my covering has taken front and center stage when I tried to sort of push it off to the wings and just sort of like, well, that's not my reason, that's not my reason. Um, uh, when I first started covering, when I first started to investigate covering, it was a feeling. I felt that I want to cover my hair. It didn't help that I was at a school with a big Islamic population, and I'd see their head coverings. I'm like, wow. And it wasn't just because they were pretty, but I'm sort of like, I want to do that too. Um, and uh, and I was just sort of like, I was about to become Catholic, so I was, in the RCIA, and I'm like, well, is there a rule for covering in the Catholic Church? Like, is there? That's when I found, mantillas and 1 Corinthians 11. I'm like, yes, this is it. And that's not to say it's not a rule. I'm only gonna say this disclaimer in this video once, okay? When I speak of these things, I'm only talking about myself. I'm not talking about anyone else. The Catholic Church does not mandate head coverings during mass or at any time. It's sort of now a personal devotion. So if you want to do it, go ahead and do it. But please do not think that I'm saying that you all must do it or you'll go to hell. Okay? Great. So anyway, I was just sort of like, I want to cover my hair. Like, I want to do that too. And I was very wary of that because I'm like, well, wait, that's just a feeling. And especially since I'm sort of like all these pretty, hijabs and stuff like that. I'm like, well, I'm only jumping on a bandwagon. I only want to do it because they're doing it. And though that's never really been something I've done. I don't do what other people do just for the sake of like, well, everybody else is doing it. Like, no, not really. But I had this feeling that like I want to do that too. Like I want to cover my hair. But I was sort of like, well, no, I'm just covering because of them. I'm covering because, I mean, that's just a feeling. And I had seen, religious feelings and religious convictions go in some pretty wacky directions. Like one person was convicted that God was saying that it was perfectly okay for her to divorce and remarry 3 different times. There's another person I've known who has used the Bible to sort of um, back up their convictions that it's perfectly okay to be a preacher all the while, doing all the, breaking almost all the Ten Commandments. So I had seen, and this is usually in my family, just the feelings and convictions go in some pretty haywire directions. And I'm like, oh no, I'm not doing that. So I'm like, well, if I'm going to do this, I need to have some hardcore, facts. I need I need it in writing. I need some tradition. I need something beyond, oh, I feel like doing this, the end. Um, because at that point I was sort of like feeling bad. Um, and I was looking at the church. I was looking at 1 Corinthians 11. I'm like, this is it. This is it. Like I'm supposed to cover my hair. And I'm just sort of like, yes, yes. And for the longest time, I was sort of like, that's my reason. 1 Corinthians 11 and pray without ceasing. But it had never felt. I mean, those are good verses. Those are great reasons for covering. But for me personally, it didn't feel like the central reason. It didn't feel like, oh yes, 1 Corinthians 11, like deep down in my heart, like this is the truth for me. This is the truth. I was just sort of like, well, yeah, I mean, I was sort of slapping it on to my real reason so that it had some sort of weight when other people would ask me about it, or when I'd sort of question it myself. I'm sort of like, well, why do I do this? Why is this something that I feel like I need to do? Um, so I was like, okay, well, those are my reasons. But over time, those reasons became less solidified. I'm sort of like, well, because honestly, at this point, I really do think that 1 Corinthians 11 is speaking about, covering during Mass, during church, during worship. Um, and I'm sort of like, well, I mean, that's not to detract from those who cover 24/7. But it's sort of like, well, that's not exactly speaking to those of us who do cover 24/7. And I was like, well, if I don't have that reason, then what is my reason? And then there's the pray without ceasing. It's like, yes, we'd all love to pray without ceasing, but I don't pray without ceasing. I can't. Like right now while I'm doing this video, I'm afraid I'm not praying right now. I'm not. And even then, like men and hats. I mean, they're not praying without ceasing, and throughout history, they have worn hats, except for when they are praying or except for when they go to church. So I'm like, well, I have to have a reason. I have to have, some concrete evidence. But then I realized, like, the last few months, starting around the last few videos I made in July, that I don't absolutely have to have a concrete, in your face, written in the Bible, written, somewhere in some papal encyclical reason that says you are to cover your hair. I don't. Because in the end, it's a religious feeling, or a spiritual feeling, a spiritual conviction. And I realized that spiritual convictions, even though I saw them go haywire in my own family and people at my church, are not necessarily bad. Because it was spiritual conviction that told, all the saints throughout the ages to do whatever it was that made them saints. Whether it was Saint Francis of Assisi, who gave up everything, he was a hotshot. He was rich and famous, or I'm not sure famous, but he was a soldier for the Crusades and stuff like that. And everybody thought he was cool. And I mean, come on, he was rich and young and handsome. I mean, he gave up everything to start a monastery. Or not, I don't think he went and started a monastery, but he started this movement, which ended up becoming a monastery. I might not have all my facts right, but still. So he did something where it's like, nowhere in the Bible does it say, like, you will give up like, yes, it does say, like, give up all your earthly possessions, but nowhere does it say, like, you shall start a monastery in Assisi, Italy. It doesn't say that in the Bible. Just like, it doesn't say, like, hey, girl's named Claire, like, you will start a convent, in conjunction with St. Francis of Assisi. Like, just letting you know. Like, it does not say that in the Bible. A lot of times, God would speak to these people through their convictions, through their feelings, that, hey, this is a direction that I should go in. And, it takes time to figure that out. It takes, discernment. I mean, even with vocations like becoming a priest, a nun, marrying, it takes time to discern that emotional feeling, because the Bible says, like, yeah, get married, go ahead, great. But it doesn't say who to get married to. It doesn't say, like, yes, Sally, you will marry Bob. He doesn't. If only. I mean, seriously, if I could find a Catholic matchmaker somewhere, it's like I would call them up. But nowhere does it say that. You have, like, first of all, you have to have that sort of emotional drive to do it, or not emotional, but that spiritual drive to do it, and then you have to discern which direction it's sort of taking you. And you had to ask God, sit down and say, like, well, is this the right thing? And I went through that a lot with head covering. I'm like, well, am I just doing this for the fun of it? Because, I mean, it's not the worst thing in the world, but I'm not doing it because, like, yay, look at me, look at my hair, it's covered, and I'm better than you. I don't do it for that. I do it because I feel this, or actually, it's not even that I feel this sensation that I should cover when I'm covered. When I cover my hair, it feels natural. It's when I don't have my hair covered, and it's been a while since I've not had my hair covered out in public, that I feel like this is wrong, I need to cover my hair. For me, it is a spiritual conviction. It is God telling me that he wants me to cover my hair. I have come to that conclusion. That's just how it is. I think for a lot of ladies who, because I read the blogs and stuff like that, and they seem to struggle with it too, like, especially those who cover full time, where it's sort of like, well, yeah, 1 Corinthians 11, but I'm not sure if it completely applies to this. So you're just sort of like, well, why do I feel this? And then you realize that it's okay to feel this way. It's okay to feel but not have concrete written in the Bible evidence for why you're doing that, because at the end of the day, the love of God is a perfectly valid reason. For the love of God, I cover my hair. I don't know why he wants me to cover my hair. I'm sure there's plenty of ladies out there who do cover their hair who don't know why either. They're just sort of like, well, of all things, why this? Like, why can't I just pray the rosary and that be it? Like, why can't I just, go to 40 hours devotion and that be it? Why can't I go feed some poor people and that be it? You know? Why can't it be one of those things? But, I mean, in conjunction with all those things, this seems to be like our main, how do you say it? Our main devotion, because that's what this is. At the end of the day, head covering, because no one's telling us to do it outside of God, it's a devotion. It is a devotion, a very physical, very visible one, even though we don't aim to be physical and visual devotion, in a world that is, if you really think about it, even though you're not saying all the truths that are associated with your head being covered with a rag, it's still very countercultural, even if you don't go into all the reasons that you do it, or for the reasons that or the things that it represents. Now, more on that in my next video. Hopefully this one will actually get posted. We'll see. See you around. God bless.